Over 700 people gathering in Ottawa this morning for the first ever Startup Day Canada. It's bringing together politicians and entrepreneurs from across the country to share stories and advice on how to create cities that nurture small business entrepreneurs and creativity. And taking the stage this morning, Prince George's very own Shauna Harper. She is behind the Startup PG movement, and she joins me now just before she takes the stage on Parliament Hill. And we've heard a lot about the startup movement, at least people who follow sort of the tech and online worlds. But for people who might not be familiar, what is it sort of in general terms?
To me, I believe the startup world, a lot of people think of it as tech and brand new startup companies. For me and for the Startup PG, it really is about the entrepreneurial spirit, nurturing that spirit and the culture around making sure people are able to try and fail even if they need to and pick up again. And so nurturing that spirit of innovation. What
are some of the programs that you run?
So out of Startup PG, we've run many in the last 6 weeks and the last year even. So Startup Drinks, the Hackathon, we had a Creative Maker Night, Startup Weekend. Just 2 nights ago, we had the Mentor to Mentor event. All of these are all about nurturing the culture so that people get a chance to meet each other, as well as build those relationships so that when they're in business, they have people to reach out to.
It sounds almost like it's a social club in some ways.
It is. It's about personal relationships, and I think people need to feel like they're in a circle of trust before they're willing to share the support that they need in order to grow their businesses.
It seems kind of opposite to the approach that you see in TV shows like The Apprentice or Dragon's Den, where it's cutthroat and you need to take down the competition in order to get what you need to get ahead in business.
It really is opposite than that, because we're looking now no longer at competition, but really at a global market. And so especially within our local city, we need to figure out ways to be more collaborative, both in our city, but also with national organizations, collaborative with local organizations, in order to make sure that Canadian companies are competitive.
How big of a deal is it for somebody from Prince George to be taking the stage and talking to Canada and Canadians about what's happening in this city?
I think it's really important. I think oftentimes communities our size are neglected as a part of economic growth of the country. And what I'm here to talk about really is to share communities our size are the perfect place to talk about economic growth, because communities our size are places where people want to move to. But unless we also get the federal support, our communities aren't necessarily large enough to gain traction quickly. And so we do need seed funding in order to gain the traction. And from there, we can nurture the culture of innovation and trying. Especially in a city like Prince George, we ripple into the northern region. So all of the, we had people from Smithers come out for Startup Weekend. We had people from Fort St. James. All of these regions all around us all feed into Prince George. So it's not just our Prince George region, Prince George City, but it's actually the region right around the north.
Northern BC, very much resource-based historically, and even looking to the future, there's a lot of focus on mining and LNG. I mean, how do you convince governments, and how do you convince anybody else, really, that it's the 3 to 5 people teams that are really going to drive the economic future?
Well, that's the thing, is when you take a look at resource, we're having a boom right now, but unless we continue to innovate within our resource industry, all we're going to be doing is we're not setting ourselves up for the future. We're not looking at how can we be global companies and be testing and innovating using the resources that we have now, which is this boom that's happening in the north. And so that whole startup culture is about how do we innovate. And for us in the north, it may not be tech companies, but it may be technology within resource or within industry. And so I think it's really important for us to take a look at nurturing that culture of entrepreneurial spirit, even within organizations or larger, say, resource companies that you don't see them as mini entrepreneurs, but that innovative spirit needs to be in there for us to be leading industrial growth.
And are you getting any surprise from people in Ottawa that Prince George has this community at all?
Definitely. They're surprised that I'm at the table speaking. They're surprised that we're on the map. We don't really hear from Prince George unless it's, the stuff that Maclean Magazine puts out there. We don't hear a lot of the stories of the successes. And for us to be able to share the culture of our city, which I think has always been there, even prior to the startup community, but now Startup Canada and Startup PG has given a platform for these stories to be told that really kind of inspire the city as well as the nation to look at smaller communities to lead.
Shauna, thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Shauna Harper is at Startup Day Canada on the Hill in Ottawa. Later this morning, she will be meeting with politicians, including MP Bob Zimmer. Right now, she's taking the stage to speak at the breakfast for Startup Day. We reached her in Ottawa.